Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when he will next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
First Minister.
No plans, near future.
Ruth Davidson.
Earlier this week, the Scottish Medicines Consortium decided not to approve the drug abiraterone to men in Scotland suffering from advanced prostate cancer, a drug which has been used so successfully to extend the life of Mr McGrahy when the Scottish Government sent him home to die. In a battle against a cancer which costs so many hundreds of Scottish men their lives every year, there have been few advances. This drug is one. Will the First Minister act to give cancer sufferers greater access to important new drugs?
First Minister.
It's a hugely serious and important issue, and everybody in this chamber recognises as new drugs come onto the marketplace, understandably, and it is totally understandable that people and patients groups who are afflicted with serious conditions have a tremendous desire to see every new drug available. But can I say in all seriousness to Ruth Davidson, the SMC process, which has been in Scotland now for 10 years, is hugely and substantially admired because of its independence and its thoroughness. Over that 10 years, there hasn't been a single case of any government overruling an SMC judgment. And of course, there is a very substantial and good reason for that. What happens now is that the drug company concerned has indicated it's going to go back and resubmit. The SMC has the extraordinary difficult task of judging the efficacy of treatment against the budgetary constraints which inevitably apply in any health service. If the position of the SMC, or NICE for that matter, in England, was to accept every submission that came forward, it would be impossible to sustain the drugs budget. They have to do it in criteria, and I do think Ruth Davidson should pay considerable attention to what a number of the cancer charities have been saying about the obligations on drugs company with new drugs coming forward to try and make them available to the National Health Service at a cost which can be afforded.
Ruth Davidson.
The First Minister misrepresents what I was asking. I wasn't asking him to overrule the SMC, which is indeed independent and thorough. There is an obvious solution here, a Scottish Cancer Drugs Fund. My predecessor, Annabel Goldie, raised it 14 months ago with the First Minister. Conservatives then met with him and his Health Secretary. We have since brought it to the Chamber for debate as lately as September. In other parts of the UK, we have seen the huge impact that this can make on sufferers and their families. To date, 12,000 people have had their lives extended through the Cancer Drugs Fund. What possible excuse does the First Minister have to refuse the same opportunity to cancer sufferers in Scotland? Government is about choices. The First Minister chose to find £50 million to give free prescriptions to people like himself who can afford to pay for them. But he is choosing not to find a more modest sum to extend and approve the lives of Scots with fatal conditions. Will the First Minister now make a different choice? Will he now, 14 months down the line, after countless premature deaths, reconsider, intervene and support a Scottish Cancer Drugs Fund?
First Minister.
Well, Ruth Davidson says that she didn't suggest that ministers should overrule the SMC. Of course, her health spokesman did, and he shouldn't have done that, because that is a process which depends on its independence for its effectiveness. And it is not the case that medicines, even those not approved by the SMC, can't be made available to patients in Scotland. We have the process of individual patient treatment requests. 126 medicines were requested through that process within NHS Scotland of medicines which are not approved by SMC as yet, and 87 of these requests were approved. 39 were not approved. Ruth Davidson presents to this chamber the impression that the Cancer Drugs Fund initiative taking place in England is one which is substantially supported. I mean, can I remind her that the cancer charities Myeloma UK, Breakthrough Breast Cancer, Macmillan Cancer Support issued a briefing paper for the Scottish parliamentary debate on whether or not Scotland should have a cancer drugs fund, and said, quote, "The Cancer Drugs Fund does not address the root causes of why patients may be denied access to treatment." Or her own Tory MP colleague, Pauline Latham, quote, from the 26th of December last year, quote, "The Cancer Drugs Fund was set up to stop this kind of lottery in my area. It is not fit for purpose and it's not working for the benefit of patients." So this chamber did consider the question of the Cancer Drugs Fund and paid attention to the many submissions that we received suggesting that that was not the best way forward. Can I suggest to her that the process we have in Scotland works effectively? 60% of the drugs which are resubmitted on a more reasonable cost basis after initially being turned down by the SMC are then approved. I hope and believe that people, now that Ruth Davidson has said that we shouldn't interfere with that process, understand the necessity of the independence and the rigour of the SMC process. And now that she is aware, as I'm sure she is, that the non-approval of a drug does not mean there is still the process of individual patient treatment requests, where an individual clinician can go on the precise circumstances of a patient and argue on therapeutic value, has had a great deal of efficacy where it's been applied. I do think on this subject, above all, that this chamber, in terms of our responsibility to the people of Scotland, and particularly people who are suffering from grievous diseases, should be able to see the substance and efforts that have been made to enable to give people in Scotland the best possible treatment.